So we kind of looked around and we decided that GameMaker seemed to be the friendliest way to kind of get into coding and begin making a game when neither of us had before.
How about we start by you telling us a few words about yourself? Who are you?
I am Chantal Ryan. I am from Australia. I am an anthropologist and the director of the game studio We Have Always Lived in the Forest. I am currently making the game darkwebSTREAMER, which is a horror RPG streaming simulation game.
How did you come from game making to, from anthropology to game?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a complicated road. I've always been a gamer, and even when I was very young, I tried to make games in like Adventure Game Studio and even like little Flash games. I really loved kind of the indie game scene even when I was quite young. And then I was a writer for a long time, and I was also a graphic and web designer. So I was always a little bit technologically savvy. I ended up going to university. I was really fascinated by human nature and social psychology and things like that. And then I kind of just had an idea for a video game that kind of just hit me when I was watching a movie. It was a movie that was actually like a found footage film based on YouTube. And they did a really good job of making it feel like you were watching a real YouTuber go through this kind of really creepy experience because it was a horror movie. And yeah, at the end of it, I was like really fascinated by the psychology of what had happened in the movie and how this phenomenon of like the YouTube streamer wanted endanger themselves to get more viewers and really risk their lives for social credit. Exploring the psychology of that came to me, and the only way it felt like I could engage with that was if I made a video game that was interactive and that could kind of explore kind of mechanically, like the psychological mechanics of doing these things. And so I went to a friend of mine who was not a programmer. And I said, I have this great idea for a game. And he said, let's do it. And I was like, okay, how? And so we kind of looked around and we decided that GameMaker seemed to be the friendliest way to kind of get into coding and begin making a game when neither of us had before, but it was kind of rigorous and had enough engine strength to really provide the ability to put the mechanics in that we wanted to. We put some concept art out on Twitter and some other social media, and then all of a sudden we had publishers messaging us and asking us for pitch decks, and we were like, what's a pitch deck? And I started going to events locally and then ended up attending internationally, presenting our country on the world stage of games. So it's been really cool.
Did you have any difficulties because of your gender?
Yes, definitely. There have been times when you could kind of tell that people weren't necessarily taking me seriously or thought, I was kind of all talk and no backup. Kind of earlier on, I had long conversations with a successful local game developer. We actually had been compared to them before in what we were doing with our games. So, we had that kind of similar mindset and rapport. And even though we ended up, talking a total of like 10 to 12 hours about video games, there was one moment where we were sitting together face to face And they kind of just started to interrogate me. And they were just very, very critical and almost challenging me when I was talking about some of the cool AI we were putting in the game. They basically just told me, okay, explain how you would go about implementing this in code. It was like basically what they were saying was, I don't really believe that you know how to do the things that you're talking about doing. So I'm going to make you spell it out in order to prove that you can't. I had that moment of decision where I was like, do I like indulge this kind of really rude behavior? Or do I just kind of, tell them that I don't need to defend myself to you? I ultimately did engage, and I spelled out, in code language exactly what problems I had to tackle. And at the end of that explanation, he kind of sat back and he looked at me and he was like, you do know what you're talking about. At Gamescom, when it was just me womaning the booth, I noticed quite a few people would walk up to the booth and look at darkwebSTREAMER and look really intrigued. And they would look around, and you could see that they were looking for the devs so they could ask if they could play. And they would just look through me. I would be standing there, and then they would just end up walking away because they didn't find the guy.
What do you think we can do to encourage women and girls to start their careers in game development or in game industry in general?
I think visibility is by far the most important stepping stone to providing careers for women in games. Actually, some of the earliest game makers were women, and some of the most popular games of all time were made or co-made by women. Always felt like there was a place for me. Whereas there was a long stretch of time in the games industry where, women really became minimized, and all the top titles coming out were made by men, or men were being put in charge of them in, kind of just as games were reaching this zeitgeist of culture. I attended a workshop for women who were pitching games recently. It was held by Women in Games International and Xsola, and they had a really interesting statistic there. And it was something like, when in an investment meeting in the games industry, women were asked approximately 16 to 20 questions to every one question that a man was asked in an investment meeting. So there's obviously a lot of bias and doubt that goes into women looking to professionally make games and become leaders in games in particular. Actually, like putting a focus on supporting women getting funding and placing that belief in them that they can lead projects and place creative vision at the helm of their projects is, I think, going to really raise up the industry as well.